Anybody here?
A lot of my family's on.
Okay, so Phil's going to talk right in the microphone because he has a much softer voice than I
A
do.
little deeper today.
A little deeper today. Okay. Anyway, everybody, welcome to Brown Bag Lunch. We're glad to see you all. There's a card going around, get well card, I think, for Marcella Bermel, right? So please sign that. We just have a couple of announcements. Everybody knows that we had our first Halloween ever fundraiser last weekend, Friday and Saturday nights. And it was called Night at the Museum, and part of it was down here, and part of it was out in the creepy machine shed. And we did well. We made over almost $1,600, which is really neat, considering the fact that it's going to be this Friday and Saturday night coming up again. It's going to be 2 different weekends. So we hope that everybody had a good time. We think they did. Hopefully the word is spread, and more people will come this Friday and Saturday, and we'll do even better, because winter is coming, and we do have to pay the heat bills. So that'll be a good thing.
Bonnie, remind them there's food.
Yes, there is food. Thank you. And it did get in every advertisement except the poster. It did not get on the poster. But there is a very fine food stand in the depot. You just go to the depot to buy your ticket and to get your food. And we want to thank Diane Wiedemann. She's done an awesome job out there. John Pulowski organized everything, and gee, he had so much good help with Carter Yarlum, and Jerry was down here working the whole time, she and her husband, and everybody has worked very, very hard. And so we're thankful for that. And just remember, Friday and Saturday, this coming up, we'll be doing the same thing again. So we hope you can come and enjoy it. If you have grandkids, be sure and bring them, because they'll have a lot of fun. So thank you for everybody who helped with that. I just want to be sure that everybody knows that Sunday, October 26th at 2 o'clock in the main museum on the fairgrounds, we're going to have an outstanding program. The speaker is Bill Green. He's a retired state of Iowa archaeologist. He was there for 20 years. And when he retired, he went to Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. And while he was there, he discovered a lot of archaeological treasures that had been found in Jackson County, because 99 years ago, there was an excavation here at what's called Seaburger Cave. And a lot of you who have heard of Seaburger Cave, it is near Fulton. And so it's going to be a wonderful program. He talks a lot about, so he then in 2023 found all these things from 99 years ago, did all of the testing and organizing and archiving and everything, and so he has then written a scientific study about this. So it's about to be published, and he's going to come and talk about that. But it's going to be interesting to many of you, because in doing so, he talks about the men from Jackson County that were heavily involved in that. Probably the main person that made that happen, or got them to come here to do that particular cave, was Frank Ellis from the Ellis Museum. And then the man who came to actually do the excavation was a doctor, I think Paul Nesbitt. And he's the person that actually got Paul Sagers interested in archaeology, so that he went ahead and did the excavations and things that he had done. And we ended up with Sagers Museum, which all of you know. So it should be a really interesting program. He certainly is an expert on this subject, and it will have a lot of Jackson County history in it. So we hope that you'll come to that Sunday, the 26th of October, 2 o'clock at the museum on the fairgrounds. All right. That being said, we have to remind you, of course, excuse me, this started out to be the program for the Heritage Dinner that we always have on the first Sunday of November. Well, that schedule got changed around for a little bit, and then changed back to the 2nd of November. But on that day, we will have not this program, because it's going to be a week ahead of time, but we will be having a Hall of Fame program. And Alice and Dennis Mans are going to do that for us. They're going to be talking about Dr. and Mrs. They're going to be talking about Dr. and Mrs. Luz. Thank you. Dr. and Mrs. Luz. And they are the people that are going to be put into our Hall of Fame. So dinner tickets are in the mail for that. You know, that's the one time that we mail everybody who's a member 4 tickets. You either use them or sell them to your neighbors and friends, or you can return them to us if you have to. But the dinner will be catered by Geronimo's. It'll be an excellent, excellent dinner. The cost will be $5 in advance, or $15 in advance, or $17 at the door. Next week's brown bag lunch will be done by Sue Mayberry, and I know she has 2 topics prepared, and I'm not sure which one she's going to do, so stay tuned for that. Could we please sing happy birthday to Roger? He just came in. Roger Stewart, one of our most favorite people in the whole wide world, is here, and we would like to sing happy birthday to him. It is how many years?
I'm 94 years young.
Sorry,
Thank you.
we didn't know for sure he was coming. We're glad to hear that. Congratulations. Okay, so we're going to turn the time over to now to our special guest, Phil Owen. We are so happy when he ventures down from Monticello to share things with us, and he's going to be telling you about a book that he's writing. He will be telling you about that, and today he's specifically going to talk, I believe, about the chapters that deal with Jones County. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll turn the time over to Phil. Thank you, Phil.
Okay. Hey, I'm always glad to get back here.
And you got to talk into the mic.
Yeah, get warmed up first.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. Boy, you know, I'm always impressed when I come down here. I go away with some ideas and some examples of how to do this. I work with other museums, and 4 in particular. You know, counties around, I've kind of got acquainted with Delaware, Dubuque, Jackson, and Jones. They will talk a little about Jones, but of all the ones I work with, boy, you folks got it together. Everybody in here is a volunteer, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, just being here, you fill up space. So I'm really glad to see that, and I just found out I got an invite to come back the 26th.
Right, so will you move the microphone up just a little bit? You're taller than I am.
Okay.
All right, slide it up.
Okay.
All right.
I need a throat mic.
I wish we had one. We used to.
Slow me down, Lord. Yeah, I didn't know about this upcoming Seabird Cave deal. That sounds pretty exciting.
It does.
Jeff isn't here, my son, today. Got Gerald, my brother, he's here. Bring my touring section along. But say, I'm glad you're back here to see my hometown again. I want to begin with an admission, apology. I was wrong in my books and some of my presentations. I stretched reality a little bit. I'll do that when I get busy writing and talking. But I picked up some information on deserted, abandoned villages, and I turned that into ghost towns. Well, the writer and the speaker, originally, I don't think that was their intent. They didn't call it ghost town, they called it abandoned, way back in 1910. But it just seemed like ghost town. It was a marketing label, and I put that on some of my books. I think it's called Tri-County Ghost Town. Well, I did take his list, way back in 1910, of his abandoned towns, and I'm going to redo it this time and call it just what it is, abandoned. But that apology out of the way, I guess I'll move on to sorry, it's a lesson for you. History moves along like a tide, and it changes with the tide. One generation reads back, we're going to go back quite a ways to see British. I heard about it, but that's about it. But, and I'm sure the facts have changed. Bones don't change. stone doesn't change. So there's something about archaeology, it's a little bit of solid fact to it. But I'm going to talk about stories. Start off with a story. How many remember the one room at school, a rainy day, snowing, or just teacher didn't want us to go out? And so we're going to do a different thing today. Get in a circle, and you start with a story that you make up or something, you know, and you whisper it. How many know? How many have done? You whisper around the circle. You know, maybe got 15 kids, maybe. And when you get done at the end of the last one, you tell us what's going on in that whispering, and then the person who started it can hear and tell us what did to start with. Oh my God. Kids must have been hard of hearing like me, because some of the stories that came back around were just way, way, way off. And history can do that. You got to be kind of careful on what you do nowadays, because you can find so much stuff out there. But earlier this year I did start a new book. It was not that new, but I thought, well, 1776, that's coming up 26. How can that be? Well, there wasn't much going on around here 250 years ago. They're the natives. In the East, yes, but not so much here. But we're going to dig into that, and the book is called Iowa History, okay, 10,000 years from 10,000 feet. Well, both of them sound kind of ambitious. It's not a detailed history of Iowa by any means. There's a little bit of, it starts out with some things we share that do go back a long ways. Indian arrowheads, there's always Paul Seegers, we followed him once in a while, and he was an interesting guy. And boy, we'd have some arrowheads, and he could tell us where they came from. Sometimes the stone was imported from Ohio by the Indians, because we didn't have a lot of flint the Indians needed. But the history goes back, and it gets added, enhanced, corrected as life goes on. But that's 250 years and from 20,000 years to 10,000 feet. It's kind of like looking down. How many have flown across your farmland or your community in a small plane? I mean, depending on the time of the year, you can usually pick out things going up. You get up, you know, up a long ways. Well, even to 10,000 feet, school district lines disappear, boundary lines disappear, townships disappear. It's kind of like, well, gee, what is it? We're all kind of together, aren't we? That's being tested right now, folks, and we're part of it. Let's keep it together for now. But this book is a combination of 10,000 feet and up close. I mean, there'll be some examples I have that are, I think, pretty accurate from what I know. Some of them I was there, so I like to think I knew a little bit. But the story goes around, you just never know. We can start with the flags over Iowa. How many have heard of the 5 Flag Center in Dubuque? How many have been in it? Yeah, right. Oh, that's kind of a marketing gimmick. Like 5 seasons in Cedar Rapids. Well, what are they? Well, a time to enjoy. That's the 5th season. That sounds pretty good. Dubuque actually had the gall or the facts to say, well, there were 5 flags that flew over this area. So, okay, what were they? See if you've heard of them. The fleur-de-lis. Want to know what that is? French. Okay, it's kind of a 3, I think it's flower of the lily or something like that it stands for. And then there was a symbol, the Royal Arms of France, the Royal Flag of Spain, the Union Jack of Great Britain, and then we got the French Republic flag of Napoleon. They're back and forth. Couldn't decide who owned what or when, where. Hey, nobody owned much of anything except the Indians. Everybody else kind of claimed, well, I'll put a flag over here, they'll do something. Yeah, it didn't do much. Then finally, the American Stars and Stripes. Well, there weren't 48 or 50 then by any means when the Stars and Stripes flew. That was when Napoleon decided he needed some money. And Jefferson sent 2 people to get the rights to go up and down the river. That's what he wanted. Or some land maybe, I don't know just where. Well, Napoleon said to his emissaries, hey, we'd like to get rid of the whole darn place. You have it all. What do you pay for it? I think we paid $13 million. It was about 2 cents an acre. But we all share that history. And I don't care if you're in, I think it was one of 7 states maybe. Everybody in Iowa certainly shares that history. But Iowa was not officially opened. I mean, okay, it was open when Marquette and Joliet swam down, or they didn't swim, okay, they floated. I catch myself stretching, see? They floated past Dubuque. No record that they stopped. Fact is, they were floating from Michigan, I think, and somebody along the way, along about Iowa, May, told them, well, there's some friendly, unfriendly natives, or the Spanish, who controlled the lower end, were downstream. Marquette and Joliet said, well, we've seen enough. They went back home. Then, well, Zebulon Pike, Zebulon, and who was the other one that came along about that same time? Anyway, you know, they came by the Mississippi and spent some time probably here and there. But it's a long history that we share, each of these counties and each of these stories, I guess, of facts I'll be sharing. But the definition for a ghost town, that's a marketing thing, okay? I don't think any town wants to proudly claim they are a ghost, although there are some who stretch the truth now. In Jones County up there, the old county home, across the museum, it's a 3-story building. People bought it and they claim it's a ghosted. I never heard of the people living there. I was in it several times. There is a cemetery right across the road, and it does have some history, but it wasn't thought of as ghost until they said, oh, we can market this place, kind of like Buckhorn. I didn't know that was a ghost. Sorry. So we got to watch kind of how we're phrasing our history, I guess. Dubuque and Galena, that's another area we share. The history of Iowa started, the first industry, the first business for profit started in Dubuque by Julian Dubuque. And when he came down the river, he either knew there was lead there, or he got out and he could see what looked like modules of lead laying around. He made a business out of it and turned it into a fairly profitable business. The name wound up as the name of Dubuque, of course. So we share that. And it was founded in 1790, so when he started, and it was actually well over into the 1700s, there was lead there. But when lead mining ceased in Galena, everybody been to Galena, right? Quite a place. Where do these buildings come from? Not that many people there. Well, at one time, there were 10,000 people in Galena. It was bigger than Chicago. And that's pretty hard to believe, way on the edge of Illinois, and there's Chicago right down by the lake. Well, eventually, Chicago became center of railroads and center of everything else. And Galena, after the mines closed, I mean, it just... And it must have been a pretty sad, spooky place. Somebody could have said, hey, there's half the buildings are empty. Well, there's some people from Chicago supposedly had some loose change and time in their hand. They started buying up those buildings, and there were some businesses started kind of here and there. Before long, it became the tourist attraction that it is today. And I think they had millions of visitors every week, every month, or not month, but during the season anyway. So it varies, it's a moving tide. But Iowa had, and still does, a lot of water. I mean, Jones County has got the edge of 3 rivers going through it. Just drainage everywhere. In fact, the land was so swampy that some of them couldn't even farm it until the Germans came along with their tiling spades. This is how we did it in northern Germany. So they turned it into productive land. And they bought the land that was nobody else wanted, and they bought it cheap. And that's where my son lives on the farm now. But the period of settlement in Iowa goes back, you know, to the early 1800s. 1833 was the first official date that people could move in. Where did they move from? They moved from Illinois and Wisconsin. They'd been there quite a while. Some of them were 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th generation from Europe. we had family in Boston, supposedly, in 1640, somewhere in there. You know, they were here a long time. They got restless eventually. Some of us wound up out here. But, you know, people didn't wait around for roads or amenities or law and order or any of that, what we call necessities today. Running a community or raising a family. So what happened when this land opened up? Well, the government in D.C. said, well, we got to get people out on this land. We want to sell this stuff. And we got to get people out here that want it. So what do we need? And one of the representatives from Iowa, even though it wasn't a state, it was a territory, the government appointed, I don't know how this representative got elected or whatever, but we had one from the Iowa territory who knew we needed a road, and he thought, well, from Dubuque to Iowa City, that's the place to have. So he campaigned, along with a few other entrepreneurs who said, hey, there's money to be made out here. You got to open this territory. There's lead here, but in Dubuque, but soil. And we think there's other stuff out there. Timber, water, limestone. I don't know if they were in love with limestone then like we are now, but it's everywhere. And we just take it for granted. But boy, it employs quite a few people. And it's built some homes. So this person said, okay, we're going to get, and they did, they passed a law, this is appropriation for $20,000. That's like $600,000 today. Government's always had money until they don't, but that's another story. Anyway, $20,000, and a couple brothers from Langworthy, Iowa, up here, Langworthy brothers, they said, we're going to contract to be the prime contractors for this road from Dubuque to Iowa City, and it's going to need someone to plow a furrow. Well, we know that guy, a farmer from Cascade, just down the road from Monticello, Lyman Dillon. He came from the east, actually. He'd been in servitude with somebody, and he kind of got back here where he could make his own way. And they hired him. He was going to get $3 a mile for every mile that he plowed between Dubuque and Iowa City. That's where the new capital, or that's where the territorial capital was after they moved out. It was in Wisconsin for a while. And that, finally, when we got right to settle here, anyway, they said, well, this road will provide a secure, quick path for the dragoons, which means the Home Guard or the National Guard, to settle the territory. Keep the Indians quiet, is what it amounts to. Anyway, he got the $20,000, the two brothers, and the plan was to plow this furrow from Dubuque to Iowa City, touching as many county seats as possible. Now, in 1839, this is before the state was a state, and it had only been open for settlement for 6 years, but they'd already apparently had or was planning to have county seats. And the road was supposed to touch those as a means to getting the troops from here to there. Actually, the troops hardly ever used this road. It was the travelers who used the road. And it wasn't a road, it was grass. No bridges, nothing. In fact, just this furrow. And later somebody said, well, they didn't plow that. Well, how to get there? Well, the editor of the paper in Anamosa at that time, his story is, he went out and interviewed and he looked for himself. And sure enough, there was a furrow, and there were tufts of soil, some of them quite high, where the surveyors had left the mound and said, this is the path. And you figure out what to do with it. That was all this said. But that path went down to Iowa City. It soon became hardpack, and the grass was gone quickly. And it became the road. It was called the military road in the appropriation text to get the money. It was called Dillon Trail for the locals who knew where that was. People were getting lost, supposedly, in the tall grass. If you were on a horse, yeah, you could kind of see across where you were headed, but supposedly they were wandering off the trail, winding up who knows where. But the trail became the road, which is now mostly Highway 151 from Dubuque, from, you know, down to the west of Anamosa, and then it turns into Highway 1, going to Iowa City. So that's pretty much the route where this trail was. And there's road signs there yet. I know where they are. This is Dillon Road, County Road. The one down by Solon is Dillon Trail, I think. I'm not sure. Actually, road signs. So it was the trail that opened up the Iowa frontier. And I'm sure people settled in Clay Mills used that road. They went north to get to Dubuque or south. It was the only road in and out of Iowa. The Indians had been here and they had trails for 10,000 years. And we forget that. The roads may have followed that. I tell you one thing, they were kind of like cow paths. How many went and get the cows way in the back pasture? Yeah. What did you follow a lot of time? You followed cattle paths, cow paths, avoiding the puddles and whatever. But the cows were smart. They knew where to go. And this survey crew, we don't know if they followed the cow paths or Indian trails or what. They just, I know one place for sure, they curved around south of Monticello to avoid going over the creek. They can avoid one bridge if they curved around this way and wound up the same point. So they kind of use common sense. But when you get to the river, here's the best ford we can see. It's a rock bottom. Sorry. High water, well, take a chance, otherwise wait for the rain to quit. It was a time that we cannot appreciate. I'm sorry. I love to read about it, think about it. But, oh, we thought we were tough and living up by the caves. We weren't tough at all. We were just naive, I think. But that road was the path that opened the Iowa Territory. And it set the pace for a lot of cities along the way. I think there were 9 villages where it went through. I'm sorry to say, well, Cascade is, you all know that. That was the first. That was where Lyman Dillon, that was his home. He had 5 oxen, I think. I don't know if he went out and bought them special for this contract or what, but he started, we don't know if he started in Dubuque or Iowa City. Common sense, they lived in Cascade, so he must have started in Dubuque. And a surveyor was going along with a wagon with some supplies, and they camped out overnight. It took maybe 10 days. So he figured out, they said 96 miles, $3 a mile. It was like quite a bit of money back then. But that was the road, and it evolved into what we have today. And along with, I think Iowa has, I don't know, the record, I think we're 5th highest number of bridges and a lot of miles per people. That's our problem. We don't have enough people, and we got too many roads and bridges that we just can't close, like trying to do on some of them. But then, after that, the roads, they started, they were still all dirt and mud. I remember that. If you didn't live on one, you probably had someone who did. And we lived on one, and our grandparents lived on one, so we got plenty of mud. But the roads then were replaced or supplemented by railroads. Now the railroads were great because they would run mud, snow. Well, the snow got real bad, but then they shoveled it up. So it would be a much more secure path. And the first railroad came into Iowa. The actual engine was transported across the barge by what's Davenport, I guess, was Anton LeClaire. I think they named the engine Anton or one or the other. It was a fancy looking thing. When you got that kind of money, I guess you can paint your name on a locomotive. But they arrived as small villages started sprouting. And there's a record in Jones County. We have 14, I believe, communities in that county that are still populated. And I called some of those last time ghost towns because the post houses had been abandoned and it was on the list. So therefore, Amber is a ghost town. Well, hey, I know some good people who live there and still do. One's pretty well off, actually. It's not ghostly, it never has been. So I apologize again for putting that label on something. I don't remember why I did it. It just seemed like a thing to do. But when the railroad came through Jones County, 1873, a little late actually after the Civil War, but that's another story. The villages started sprouting up ahead of the railroad because they knew the survey stakes were there. And somebody said, well, I think I'm going to start a general store right there because this is going to attract some people, which they did. There was, that one year, 1873, I believe there was six villages in that same year in Jones County alone who never got over 23,000 people in the whole county. There were 6 little villages that sprouted up. Now, apparently it didn't take very many people to support a village. Eight, 9 out of 10 lived on the land. They grew some of their food, but they needed, well, I don't say needed it, but they got coffee and tea and flour and sugar and salt and other incidentals. So these merchants just started sprouting, and before long there were people living there. So that's how we've got over 1,000 communities in Iowa. 1,056, I believe. 993, something like that, are incorporated. Some of them are pretty small. One in Jones County 5-6 years ago said, we can't afford our plumbing and our water and our sewer anymore. County, we're out of here. They disbanded their incorporation, and the county picks up the bill. So every taxpayer in Jones County now helps pay for a water system that either is not safe. Well, Hurstville went through that after, you remember that history? That was privately owned. But anyway, there's, I believe, 3 communities right now that the county is already paying for what's left of the infrastructure for those people still live. You can't just declare these towns closed like a business like Clinton Engines. I mean, some of that's still there, thank goodness. You guys have done a good job saving. But the roads, now, quite frankly, we have more roads per capita than we need. How else do you say it? You just have to say it. Well, the farmer that's got 240 acres back at the end of a road somewhere wants to get the grain out. And they don't have access to cross all the land somebody else owns, so they need a road. So it's not going to be easy trying to figure out how to keep everybody quality of life, happy, content. It's starting to get a little contentious already, so be aware of that in terms of, well, you know, that's just the way it's going to be, I guess. But back to this trail again. In 1849, I remember what happens out of the state, there's quite a ways west. 1849, gold rush. Seemed like an exciting time, but a long ways away. So everybody was heading to California, including many who should have never left home. Some left just because it was darn hard where they were at, and it can't be any worse. It was. I mean, the merchants that were selling things did pretty good. They found villages out there where the people needed denim clothes, something heavy. That's where the denim jeans came from. So anyway, these gold miners were just coming from all over. The story is in Monticello history, in 1849, there were over 800 covered wagons that went through Monticello. Now, where were they coming? Well, they were coming from the so-called Key City, Dubuque. Keystone, it was at the beginning of this trail, which was well worn by then. Well, there might have been a bridge. There were some fords through some improved access in and out of rivers and creeks. But 800 covered wagons went through that prairie road lane through Dubuque, and it kept right on going. Either Iowa City or maybe they went through Cedar Rapids, but somehow they got from point A to point B in California. Some of them came back much poorer when they left. But trails, roads, and railroads, water bridges and water, that's become part of our culture here. And we just take it for granted. We just say, well, Delview's a nice place, got a lot of water stuff. Even in the Coconut River, you can float a canoe if you want to. But if you look at post offices as an indicator of quality of life, people living there, I mean, post office was like a county seat. If you had a post office, I suppose a tavern was necessary for some, but the post office and a county seat were seen as a mark of future growth for those coming into the area. They didn't really know of any other resource or anything. You could see timber, that was all over. You could see water, which is power. By that time, by the way, there was lead in Dubuque. And I just learned in this research, there was lead in Jones County. There's a lead mine road south of Anamosa. Now I was curious, why would that be? Well, it turns out there was a fair amount of lead mined. It's right along the Wapsie River, just 2-3 miles out of Anamosa. And the lead nodules were laying on top of the ground. Well, there wasn't a big need for just nodules, but if you had enough of it, you could melt it down, and they made, not too healthy actually, plates and utensils because it was soft. What actually poisoned the Romans because they had lead pipes for their water. Now, lead pipes for the sewer is okay, but water not so much. But Jones County had this lead, and I think they got maybe, I can't tell if it's per year or total, it was less than 100 tons, 100,000 tons. It sounds like a lot, but they were taking millions of tons of lead out of Galena and Dubuque. I mean, during the war, World War or Civil War, they were supplying all the ammunition for the North. I mean, think about the cannonballs and, well, you've seen some of the lead shot that were at the muster. And they're amazed at different sized bullets. So it took a lot of that. It made Galena, but Anamosa, I never heard much about lead. That's some of the little known stuff you find along the way. But the rest of Iowa never had any lead. There was a note maybe that gold was found up around Canton. I don't know, I never heard that. Did anybody hear that? Black Hawk Creek? Well, the truth is, yes, there's gold dust you can find. There was a mining engineer who was kind of in charge of many of the limestone quarries in eastern Iowa. He'd go out with his sifting equipment underneath the screening elevator, you know, in these rock crushing areas, and he'd screen that out. And I went to one of his presentations. He had a little pill bottle full of gold, and it was, by now probably would have been a $500 pill bottle, but it was dust mostly, but there were a few little nuggets. It's everywhere within the limestone rock. If you look far enough, you can go in a creek somewhere, and probably over a period of a week or so, you could screen out, if you knew how to pan for gold, you could probably find the same thing. But there's nothing here worth going after, that's the thing. And that's the story of the whole civilization, actually, the communities, because if there's a commodity there, and something you help manufacture it, power, water power, people, whatever, then it'll stay. It'll perpetuate. Just like this organization, if you keep finding volunteers, and that goes for everybody here, you got to go find one. But if that doesn't happen, okay, I'll use appropriate. They'll be abandoned. I mean, that's what happens. Towns come and go, and you all know some of them around here that are struggling. Let's put it that way. The raw material that we've had is probably the most overlooked, other than limestone, is sod, soil, fertile soil. That was probably the most attractive raw material, resource, mineral of anything that we had. The word was already back to Germany. Some of my wife's distant, well, fifth generation, they had letters coming back from people that had been here only a couple of months or a year. And the story was a wool, just things are just growing right out of the ground. You know, you can come here, you can plant, anything will grow. So that was the impetus that brought people from Europe, and it brought a few blacksmiths and, you know, people who had some skills, but 90% of those who came over on the boat were farmers. And many of them around here were dairy farmers, to begin with, because the land was a little on the rougher side. Out west, not so much. But I won't bother listing all these towns and villages that are marked as abandoned, okay? You can run across that list. It's on the web. It's by a man in 1910. I don't know what provoked him. He was a guy like me, curious. And he found that list, and he's got all the post offices in the whole state that were, when they were established, when they were closed. And he used that as the mark of an abandoned town. Okay, well, as population started decreasing, or moving somewhere else, the post office, they didn't have unlimited resources, although they apparently had more than what we have now. But they said, well, we're going to move your little post office. You only got 10 people. Down the road, 20 miles, there's a lot more people. So a few of them were moved. A few of them, it says the post office was located and near a platted town. Well, it didn't say settled, because many of these post offices were not in a town that was near a platted town. Cottonville, I kind of heard of the place. I guess there's a crossroad corner, but they had a post office. I think most counties in eastern Iowa were pretty heavily populated early on, and the post office felt that they just needed, because transportation was so sporadic that they needed small post office. And they'd check with the settler and say, well, will you become the drop box? People want to drop mail off and we'll pick it up once a week. Or can we drop some off there and you become the pickup point for those 5 people living there? So many of these post offices, that's what they were. They were in a home. Or they were in the country store, a little bigger places. Emmeline had a store and a post office. Iron Hill had a store and a post office. I remember the stores, but I don't remember anything about a post office. Rural Free Delivery, RFD, came along. It was a government service. I suppose somebody said, we got to do better than just spotting all these little places. People have to have it delivered to their farm. And boy, 1903, that was a big deal. So as that happened, there were post offices designated where you had to go mail something or you had to pick it up originally. But otherwise it came to your door, after RFD came out the country. And many of these little post offices didn't have a need anymore because the 15 people that were coming there now have mail service, not at their door every day probably, but I remember Paul Seegers, or Fay maybe saying, he remembers when Clay Mills had a postal delivery on a motorcycle. Somebody came through on a motorcycle. Well, I remember that. I remember we lived in a mud road, and we had a guy had a car, had wheels about like that, modified to get through the mud. He could go anywhere. But as it happened, post offices that were marginal size-wise, they went away. So that's where this big abandoned list comes from. 40 abandoned post offices in Jones County. I did the math. That cannot be. We only have what remains of 18 communities, and some of them didn't even have post office. But history goes back further yet, and the definition of a post office is not the post office on the corner. So you can look at that list. Got some other things here kind of probably wanted to talk about. But anyway, the list goes from, in Jones County, I think it starts with, some here we know, Clay Mills, of course. It starts with Argand, I never heard of the place, 1880 to 1899. So it was only open 19 years. It was they're identified by section number. Sometimes they're in an intersection of, or the joining corner of 3 sections. So you could pinpoint where that was. Sometimes they said near. Sometimes they said near so-and-so village or whatever. But it's interesting, but it really doesn't tell you much about what's going on. It kind of tells you things are changing. Must change pretty quickly. Everybody got excited. This place is really going to grow. I mean, we need a lot of land. I mean, a lot of communities. People need to get bread and so on. So we're going to spot little villages. When the railroad came along, that was 7 miles. You know why? that was what they needed, often to put a new supply of water, new supply of coal or wood, and, you know, that was a spot. Now, some of them were a lot longer than that, but on Highway 30, I think communities were about every 7 miles. They survived before Amazon, before internet, before hard surface roads, because people just didn't travel very far. Things have changed now, and I'm not sure we even understand why. And I'm 100% sure we don't understand what we should do to get ahead of the curve to keep our young people here. Or some come back. I know quite a few. I guess they went out like some and found, I kind of like back life we had out here. So there is hope, but you won't have 40 post offices again. In fact, there's question whether we're going to have Saturday delivery anymore. So times change, and if we don't identify that and stay up with it and stay ahead of it, as they say, either lead, follow, or get out of the way, we get left behind. And you folks are representing the best of both worlds. You have things that were here and made quite an impression, and you have people that are here yet still making that impression. And I don't know about your generations following you, but I would bet you like some of them closer by and possibly, but can't all stay, because this is, the reality is something different. But the book will go into that, and it'll also go into some of the other factors that, I got some history here, and one in particular. How many have heard of Edinburgh? Yeah, okay. How many have been to the so-called Historical Village Museum? Yeah. It's sad that that is where it is out in the middle of nowhere. They're open. Okay, Byron Freeze in Normal, his father down the road. You call up the number, if he's home, yeah, I can come out, I'll open the gate and go look at winter, summer, rain, but if he's not home, and whatever, and you made an out-of-town trip, man, now, I don't know your hours on your museums, but I think they're posted in quite a few hours. A drive-in, walk-in, surprise visit, hey, you find somebody open. If you do that 2 or 3 times and they're not open, like many places, I get on them quite a bit, because the number that's posted, call me, nobody calls me back. So you can't run a business that way, and I'm telling you, you can't run a museum that way, you can't run a historical that way. But we don't have any volunteers. Well, I said, maybe we don't have any volunteers because we don't have any visitors. Well, I said, yeah, I know, but we don't have visitors because we don't have volunteers. Okay, what is it, chicken or the egg? Neither. It's people who are dedicated to something bigger than themselves. And there's a lot of people around that, I see there's a couple in here that are older than I am, know what I'm talking about. You can either get involved and keep things moving, or you can sit back and enjoy them. Now, we can do both. I do both, okay? I don't lead quite as much. I don't always follow very well, but I try to get out of the way and ask a question along the line. But this history of Edinburgh is quite an interesting example. Shortly after, I think it was 1839, or maybe, I think it was even before the Dillon Trail opened up, the government decided that Edinburgh, geographic center of Jones County, that was going to be the county seat. And they designated that, and they said, we'll pay some people if you want to elect them as directors, or what they call them, supervisors then, but if you meet there, we'll pay you, I don't know, $3 per meeting or whatever. And then we're going to set up a courts there. This is going to be the center courthouse, county seat of Jones County. And that sounded pretty exciting. It was in the middle of nowhere, but like everything else, same way. I mean, the communities that are now surviving, Cascade, Anamos, and Monticello, they were in the middle of nowhere. Well, they were located alongside the trail, I'll tell you that. There's one that's died off, and had 400 people. It has 400 people there yet in the cemetery. Bowen's Prairie, you drive by, you don't know how it got there. Well, it got there because it was right next to the trail. It was one of the first settlements after Dubuque. So people did stop. I mean, 800 wagons going through that day. Some of them had to take a potty break, if nothing else, and go get something to drink. So that became the the focal point for these communities that sprouted up. Later it was the railroad. Well, the road communities are still survive. The railroad communities, not so much. Jackson County, I guess, has a railroad running along the river yet, right? They don't stop in Sevilla, do they? I don't think so. They don't stop in Bellevue. Well, they're going to stop there for the Christmas train, I believe, about 11 o'clock at night. So, transportation and the raw materials are the secret to why we're here and why we stayed. Now, I stayed not on the farm. My interests were electronics. Eventually wound up in Cedar Rapids, Collins Radio, far away from, farmland and so on. But the Edinburgh thing never sprouted. It sprouted and died like a tree planted on dry, wet, either wet soil that's not drained or baked hard, not watered. But Edinburgh, the first time the judge drove his, I guess he rode, or you drive a buggy, okay? He came out from Dubuque. Now, supposedly it was a trial. He had to ask, where is this place? And I suppose he followed a trail or something. He got there, I didn't see anything. There was one old cabin by a tree, and they told him that's where it was. He stuck around a while, nobody showed up, got his buggy and went back to Dubuque. And he said, I'm not going to come out there again until you get a courthouse. Well, they built one. Cabin, which is a replica, is still there. I don't know if that's the exact dimensions, but it's equipped with what looks like a courtroom, bench, and I don't know what else you need. But it didn't grow. I don't know why it was off the beat. It was off the trail. It was off the Dillon Trail. It was off the military road. It was the center of the county, but it wasn't the center of commerce. It didn't sprout. And eventually the county seat wound up near Anamosa, and then they couldn't decide on the name, and then it became Lexington, and then it was finally, I think in the late 1870s, they decided, well, let's call Anamosa our county seat. So it took quite a while for this process to kind of gel. But that's another story. The story goes back, I got to wrap it up here, my last page. The natives that were here, the Indians, I am having more understanding of what society they had that was pretty secure. It had worked for, well, as far as I know, Paul Sager's grandson, that was at this talk that gave on history. Yeah. His grandson was a trained archaeologist also, and he said, I believe there's evidence that the Indians were in Kokota Caves for 13,000 years. Now, what evidence he had, I don't know, but far more than identify it than I could. But his point was, the people here existed on the land, from the land, connected with the land. They weren't separated from it. They held it in reverence. And they left very, very few traces. Can we say that for us? No, I'm sorry, I feel guilty. My son said, well, you ran too much cement out at the farm. I said, well, we needed cement in the feed yard. We didn't want water, we didn't want mud. But he said, I don't need that, so he tore it all out. So we do things to the land for whatever reason. Well, Indians didn't have that kind of resources to move that kind of stuff. So they left very few marks, and I'm just amazed. In fact, I look forward to this presentation to see what they did leave behind in this cave. So there's a record there that we could learn a lot from, and that whole lesson is wrapped up in things we do here. Those Clinton engines, they're a lesson too. How to start a business, how to run a business, how to keep it running, and how to keep the community focused. Maybe community should be looking at diversifying. Don't live on one end. Collins went through that in the 80s. Man, we went from 14,000 people to 8,000 people in the 80s. That was painful. But Cedar Rapids was a lot bigger and survived really nice. Dubuque, when the lead mine closed there, no history that really rippled very much. shot tellers there, I think they're still talking about when they keep it. Galena, and that was a challenge. What will Makokata be? What will Jackson County be? It'll be whatever we want it to be, whatever we feel a need for, but more important, it'll be whatever our following generations think it should be. Will we need a store on every crossroad, or probably not? But if Amazon quits running, we might need a general store. Who knows? I mean, okay, we got it. We got Casey's. That's the mark yet of a surviving town. Casey's and Dollar General. Look around. That's the new marks. It used to be a church and a tavern. Well, I think there's some of those around yet, but if you want a quality of life, you need some commerce. And with that, it's been a diversion from where I want to read, but I don't think it's too interesting just reading something. I like to wing it a little bit. Anybody have a question or something, comment? I encourage you to come back to the Seabird Cave thing.
Thank you.
Sounds exciting. Well, enjoy coming back. Thank you.
Thank you.